We really believe that the internet can be used as a tool for good and that there are many more people who want to use it for good than for bad. So that's sort of where we're coming from. But first, before I tell you about what we do, I would love to just get a sort of read on the audience and see how many of you have heard of sex trafficking before. Okay, cool. That's much better than the general population. What about, how many of you think that trafficking has to involve movement from like state to state or country to country? Okay, that was my trick question. You all passed. Okay. So trafficking, as I think most of you probably know, especially as it relates to minors, is just the exploitation of that minor in a commercial sense for a sexual act. So when you're a minor and you're engaged in something that's typically called prostitution, it's not really prostitution. It's trafficking and you're a victim. And so we choose to talk about these individuals as survivors. But I just wanted to get that sense from you all before I started the presentation. But it looks like we have an advanced group. So, okay. So Thorn was founded as a response organization for child sex trafficking, and the goal was to prevent child sex trafficking. And soon after we launched, we realized that a whole world exists online in which people are bought and sold and advertised on mainstream websites. And one of those websites is Craigslist. So we thought to ourselves that, you know, there's obviously a real problem happening online, and there aren't that many people in the traditional nonprofit sex trafficking prevention world that are actually equipped with the tools and the technical know-how and the skills to even understand exactly what's happening in these environments and to use technology to fight back against those who are exploiting children through the use of technology. So we knew that a lot of these sex trafficking transactions were happening online. We decided to conduct a survey, and our survey actually told us that about 3/4 of the child sex trafficking victims that we interviewed in the United States were in fact trafficked online. And I'll tell you more about the survey and some of the other findings from that survey. But so we started to understand there is a problem. This problem is backed up by data. It's not anecdotal. And it's definitely a need and an area in which we could invest our time and our energy to have an impact on that population. We also, and this is data from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the National Center is the sort of national clearinghouse for all child pornography files. And so the way that it works is if you're a tech company that is like Facebook or Google, and you come across child pornography, you have to send it to the National Center. In 2004, they received 500,000 digital files of child pornography. Those were reported in from concerned citizens or internet companies or whoever. And that number spiked to 18 million in 2011. So it's an exponential growth rate, which is something we definitely don't want to see in this industry. But it's a problem that has to be addressed. And obviously the National Center can't scale to the point where they just have people reviewing every single one of these 18 million files and trying to figure out with law enforcement who the perpetrator is, who the victim is. There needs to be some sort of automated approach to the problem. So that was another need that we found when we did sort of a field audit. So coming out of that research, we knew that law enforcement just doesn't have the resources to go after every person. If you think about the sheer volume of 18 million files, there's just no way. As well as the fact that charities in general, survivor organizations, the National Center, aren't necessarily able to keep up with the technology and how it's changing and sort of morphing over time. So we thought to ourselves, how could we leverage our unique assets to make a difference? We had been working with the technology community for a while at that point. And where we came to was the tech industry really does want to work with us to protect children. NGOs really want to use technology to help protect children. Law enforcement needs to use technology to conduct investigations to help protect children. And so what we do is we sort of invest in and deploy technology innovation, because nobody in this sort of ecosystem that I've described to you, except us, has a real financial incentive or a real strong incentive to actually do that upfront investment. This has sort of shaped the way that we think about all of the programs that we conduct. We are more willing to take risks than I think most nonprofits are. And that's really important, just as you would take a risk to start a new company that has the potential to make money. We're taking risks in the hopes of finding the technology that has the most sort of potential to protect children. These are some of the people that we work with through our technology task force. It's a group of about 25 to 30 companies that we meet with about twice a year. We try to bring in engineers and sort of technologists from these companies so that they can sit with us and brainstorm how to use technology to solve a problem. There's no other group that's doing this work, and so it is really important. And the other interesting thing is they give us input on our programs, but they also learn from each other. So as a new company coming on the scene, you've developed, let's say, a photo sharing app, and you're not really thinking about child pornography. You're thinking about, how do I scale this? How do I get it in as many hands as possible? And it's really important, I think, for those types of companies to sit in a room with a Facebook or a Microsoft or someone who's been thinking about this issue for years, 10 years, 20 years, and learn from what they've already sort of done in that space. So that's one of the other purposes of the Tech Task Force. So we're a really small organization. It's me, Julie, who's in the front row over there, and Sarah, who's in the front row. So that's our whole team. And between the three of us, I run the programs, Julie's the executive director, and Sarah does the fundraising and development. So we have to be very nimble, and we get a lot of opportunities that come our way, and we have to really understand whether the opportunities make sense for us as an organization. So these are sort of our three strategic pillars of work. We invest in research because there's a lot of anecdotal evidence being used right now in this field to sort of justify certain programs. And so we're the ones who are spending the money on that research to understand how perpetrators are using technology and how it could be used for good. We also do a lot of deterrence. So remember that 18 million number I showed you earlier? That's just going to keep growing. And so as opposed to arresting every single person who's ever downloaded a child pornography file, how do we get in front of them with messaging that's very targeted and say to them, listen, we know what you're doing. It's illegal. You should rethink your behavior before you get into trouble. And that's sort of intended to be complementary to law enforcement efforts. And the third area is industry. And so we work with the tech industry and industry leaders to sort of help them figure out how to address the problem. And with their cooperation, programs that we design can actually have a much more far-reaching effect than anything that we would do independently. So today I'm going to tell you about two programs. I think they're the two programs that are sort of the most interesting and have the most sort of to offer in terms of learnings for us about this space. And also, the survivor survey gives us kind of an idea of what's actually happening out there right now. And the escort page tool is something we've designed to address a very specific problem in a very specific way. So first I'm going to talk about the survivor survey. So we essentially wanted to know more about how technology was in fact playing a role in the exploitation of children, and in particular children who are being bought and sold. So we'd heard a lot of anecdotes. We heard, some groups told us everybody meets their pimps on Facebook these days. Like, that's just what happens. And so we need to talk to Facebook about this, and we need to get them to, crack down on anyone who's older that's befriending anyone younger, and that's our solution to this problem. So one question we had in our research was, how, if at all, is the internet contributing to grooming for domestic minor sex trafficking victims? Another thing we heard was, everyone's advertised online these days. Nobody is out on the street being sold. Everyone has, an ad that they post a certain number of times with pictures, and that's how Johns or buyers find them. So we wanted to know how often that was really happening. We also wanted to know what what victims were using in terms of technology, because obviously they're posting these ads. They're ostensibly communicating with buyers through some kind of technology, whether it's an email address or a cell phone, text messaging. We just wanted to know more about how that communication was taking place, because every time we identify a sort of communication that takes place, we identify a potential intersection point where we can reach somebody, if appropriate. And that brings me to the sort of final point, which is how can we effectively leverage these communication outlets to help those individuals get out of that situation? I think a lot of really well-meaning groups get really excited about the idea that these people's phone numbers are online, their pictures are online, like, let's just go rescue them all. And it's something that we have to quench that desire to go out and just save a bunch of people, because we don't know how that kind of outreach might negatively impact that individual. So all of our outreach programs are designed with the survivor and safety kind of at the forefront, and we've tried to be really thoughtful about knowing how we could reach out to people and knowing whether it will or will not potentially endanger them. So based on those questions, we designed a survey. We did this in partnership with a researcher from Texas Christian University who had already done a lot of trafficking research. And then we worked with survivor rescue organizations who are actually on the ground. They're the ones at 2 in the morning that the police call and say, we have a 13-year-old and we need to bring her somewhere because we just picked her up on the corner. These are the people that are working with these individuals day in and day out. And so we needed their feedback on how the survey was designed and what questions were asked. So then, because of the sort of sensitive nature of the survey, we wanted to make sure that these individuals were as comfortable as possible. So we decided that instead of our researcher, or instead of us trying to conduct the survey, we would actually just give the survey to the organizations that are already working with these people, and we would ask them to do an audio recording of the interview and to have a written questionnaire for people who were not comfortable with the audio recording. And so we've conducted 115 surveys to date, and we're working on our first report. And I think what's really interesting about this, and I'm going to share the findings, which is probably the most interesting part, but also no one's ever gone out and asked these people at scale these questions. Everyone's trying to design interventions and design programs, but nobody has done this research, because if they had, we would have just looked at that research. So some of the things that we've found so far: we ask about online grooming and how they met their pimps. This is just a quote from a survivor who met her pimp on the website. So that's one, the tagged website, and that's one example of someone who did meet their pimp online. But based on the data, we found that 83% of respondents met their trafficker in person, and 83% of them developed a relationship with that trafficker in person, which makes sense, right? Pimps are very smart, savvy businessmen. They're not stupid, and they know that in order to build trust, it's actually pretty important to spend face-to-face time with someone and get them to do what they want them to do, ultimately. So this didn't surprise us, but it did run contrary to a lot of the anecdotes that we were hearing. Then we got into the use of the internet to advertise. So we asked every single person that we talked to, through the person administrating the survey, what sites they used, how the person interacted with the site. So was it the pimp that was posting ads on behalf of the individuals? And I'm going to show you some examples of these ads later. But they told us themselves how that entire process worked. Another thing is that people are saying, well, let's just pull all the pictures of the people who are being posted, and the ones that look the youngest, we'll go after and we'll try to get them some help. But what we heard from a lot of these survivors is, especially the youngest ones, they use, for the most part, fake pictures. Because if someone's out looking for them, if they're missing, if their parents are looking for them, if the police have been alerted to their absence, they're going to be found. These sites are not secret sites. They're mainstream. So 75% of the people that we talked to reported being advertised online. And then of those, 68% reported being advertised on Backpage, and 54% reported being advertised on Craigslist. So a lot of people, including some of these sites, have said to us, our sites aren't being used to host advertisements for minors who are selling sex. And this data completely disproves that assertion. And it also gives us an idea of where we're going to focus intervention efforts or where we're going to focus data analysis based on where the minors are, for the most part, being advertised. We also really wanted to talk to them about how they would have wanted to get help to escape. We asked them, did you even want help to escape? Because a lot of these individuals believe that they are, and maybe are, in love with their pimps. And so something we'd heard anecdotally was maybe they wouldn't even want help because they think they're in a romantic relationship and they don't want to leave. But 81% of victims said they did want help to escape at some point during their trafficking situation. 81% also said they never saw the number for a hotline that was offering help to them. So there's a hotline that exists. It's run by a really reputable organization. It's national. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But people who need that hotline are the ones that seem to not know about it. We asked them if they would have wanted to receive that number some way, and how would they have wanted to receive the number. So 74% said they would have wanted to, and then they talked about the different ways, so via an online ad, a text message, or a print ad in a hotel. So this data is all helping us figure out how and if to do direct outreach. So I kind of talked through these findings, but it seems that traffickers met their victims offline and then used the internet as a marketing vehicle once the victim was already in the life. Most people were advertised online. Most people wanted help to escape at some point, but almost none received help or knew where to look for help. So based on these findings, we worked with Polaris Project, which is a nonprofit, to develop a text short code. So instead of having to call a 1-888-3737-888 number, I was like, is that right? We created a short code that's actually just BeFree, B-E-F-R-E-E, and whoever needs help and whenever they need help, they can text that number. It's pretty memorable. So let's say you're really happy with your situation or moderately happy with your situation for a while, and then you change your mind, but you saw the advertisement 2 months ago when you were feeling okay about things. Hopefully, a short code would be more likely to stick in your mind than a longer phone number. And also, the other thing that we talked about is a lot of these individuals did have their own cell phones, even while they were being trafficked, but maybe they weren't able to get away from their pimp in order to make a private phone call. But a lot of them did say that they used text messaging to communicate with Johns. So it might be a more discreet way for them to reach out to help as well. And then one other takeaway that we found was essentially that it's really important not only to create something like a text short code, but then to market it directly to the people who are most in need. And so that's something that we're going to be working on this year. Okay, the second program is an escort page tool. How many of you guys have ever used Craigslist for anything? Not escorts, okay. How many of you knew that there used to be an adult services section of Craigslist where people could, okay. So there used to be this section, and people protested so much because of how mainstream a site Craigslist is that they actually shut that down in September of 2010. So a lot of activists sort of said, all right, we cracked it, we did it. What ended up happening is that all of the traffic pretty much dispersed to other sites or to other sections of Craigslist. So now you can actually find the same content, but it's just in the casual encounters section. So anyway, now that traffic is on Craigslist, it's also on other sites. And so a lot of people, when Craigslist shut down and they realized that a lot of the traffic just went to a site called Backpage, they said, all right, let's start lining things up and shut down Backpage. And we and a lot of people actually said, okay, this is not a very sustainable way to approach a problem because we just saw exactly what happened. So it didn't solve the problem, so how else can we address the problem in a more targeted way? And we're also very pro-free speech. We wanted to figure out if there was a way to actually find children who were being advertised within these environments, and we knew that they were. So one question that we tried to answer is, are people buyers of sex actually going onto these sites and explicitly looking for children? Are they hoping to find a child, or is a child sort of caught up in this big mass of data and postings, and someone clicks on them and they look fine, and so they decide to go with it, and if it happens to be a child, well, that was accidental. And we kind of ask about buyers' penchant for youth, and we heard from a lot of buyers that, a lot of survivors that it didn't seem to be that most people were explicitly seeking children to pay for sex with, but they did really want youth. So we talked to a lot of law enforcement officials to understand how they try to find kids within those environments, because it's really, for those of you who have been on Craigslist, it's very sort of old school, and Backpage is the same way. It's not very organized, it's not very easy to search and filter, as a result, law enforcement's process for finding suspected kids within these environments is very manual and can be really inefficient. So I just wanted to walk you through, if you were an investigator on a site like Backpage, this is pulled from Backpage last week, how your process would go in the current state. So there's all these postings. Everyone says they're over 18, because if you don't, Backpage will probably not post your ad. But we know they're not all necessarily over 18. And okay, this person says they're 36, and this person says they're 25. And based on just my sort of visual signals, I'm going to zero in on these 3 ads. But I'm not sure about anything. I'm just going to look at them because, one of them says new in town, which I know can sometimes be linked with trafficking. One of them says young and temporarily yours and sweet. And one of them says very petite. And so those are sort of indicators to buyers who are looking for youth that the person is on the younger side. So as an investigator, and I'm a very well-trained investigator, I know that. So that's what I'm going to focus on. The next slide is a little, sorry, I should have said this at the beginning. I black-barred it, so it shouldn't be too explicit, but I just wanted, if any of you want to close your eyes or you're easily offended, please do. But these are the actual ads that are posted. So maybe based on visual signals, I'm going to zero in on some different ones. But again, I don't know if they're fake pictures. A lot of their faces aren't showing. I can look for the ones that sort of have baby fat or seem to be younger, but I'm not really sure. And then maybe I click into an ad and I see certain keywords like young, playful, sweetheart. And you can see there the phone number. Most people would write out their phone number like 202-196-5341. They sort of spell it out and they put stars, so you can see the phone number is obfuscated. So it's a messy process. And the problem is you're relying on investigators basically spending all day sitting in front of their computer, just scrolling through and relying on basically their understanding of what they've seen so far to help them figure out which ads represent kids. And so we know, just like in the for-profit world, there's a faster and more automated and more efficient way of doing that. So how do we apply some of those technologies to this problem? You can also see that another reason it's hard for investigators is that the data is often false. So I mentioned the false pictures, but also the age stated is false. So you can't even really go by the age. The name isn't real, obviously. Faces are hidden. So it's a lot of sort of unstructured and false data. And there's a huge volume. So Backpage is just one of many escort services sites. And even just within the escort services section of Backpage, there are about 45,000 new ads posted each week. So just the scale of the problem is pretty enormous. And investigators use what they have and they do their best. But there's no way you could even get every ad to be looked at by a set of human eyes, even if we had, completely staffed up law enforcement organizations all across the country working on it. So how do we solve this problem? Basically, we had a hypothesis that we could create, with the partnership of a couple of data analytics companies, an algorithm. And the algorithm could actually help law enforcement officials surface the ads that were most likely to be children and sort of do that process that I outlined for you before, where the investigator was manually looking at different keywords, do that in an automated way. So we commissioned 2 companies that have a lot of expertise in automated understanding and semantic analysis. We scraped 3 escort services sites over a period of 3 months, and we captured and stored that data. And then at the same time, we gathered ads of children that we knew had been rescued, and they had been children when they were advertised. And basically, we used that to train the model that we were building. So that data essentially was the foundation of the algorithm, and it helped identify patterns that wouldn't even be very obvious to the human eye. So I don't know, one example is the younger individuals are, the more likely they seem to be to use texting language like shorthand, PLS, or SRY. I'm pretty young, but those are the only ones I can think of. But that's something, you know, you might notice, but you also might not notice. And so this was a way that the computer was able to sort of teach us, this is the kind of thing that's trending younger, just so you know, and then building that into the model. So once the model was strong enough that we were comfortable and it performed well in a testing environment, we ran that algorithm against that 3-month data set that we'd pulled. And basically, the algorithm was able to create another variable for us. And that variable was like an underage likelihood score. And then what we did was, and I'll spare you all the details, but basically you can test something like that by mixing in your truth set or training data with the broader data set, and then basically figuring out whether your algorithm is good enough to find the truth set data that you know is in that data set. And so it did work, and it worked with a pretty high degree of accuracy. So knowing that, we decided we would start field testing the algorithm with law enforcement. So here's an example of sort of how it looks right now. Basically, remember those phone numbers that I showed you earlier that were all wonky? Our partners, built sort of a phone number extractor. So it can find those strings that are sort of obfuscated phone numbers and pull them into this, this file. It can pull the age, creates and sort of puts in the maturity score. And that maturity score is from -1 to 1. So every ad is going to be given a score somewhere on that spectrum. It also pulls out keywords that the algorithm, finds relevant. Pulls the URL, the post ID, and the title. So basically, this is like a very, like a V1 example of how the algorithm works and how it sort of aggregates this messy data. But, you know, this is something that's already much more organized than what they were doing before. And so the idea is that law enforcement can get these reports at any interval that makes sense for them while they're doing investigations, and they can get it sorted from most likely to be a minor all the way to least likely to be a minor, and then really just start calling numbers down the list and conducting those sting operations and finding those that seem to be children. So it's a more efficient way for them to do their jobs. So here's another example, also blackbarred. The underage likelihood score of this ad was 0.85, so that's really high on that spectrum. But what you'll notice is many of the indicators were stylistic, and they're not really necessarily visible to the human eye. So this is just one example of an ad that might have gone unnoticed that was actually caught by the algorithm and then investigated. So our next steps with this project, we're field testing it with 12 different counties or regions around the country. We found 5 minors as a result of using it, and we've done just very small scale operations. But we're starting to see basically which ads are being surfaced by the algorithm relative to which ads actually end up being minors, and that's really useful for us so that we can feed that data back into the tool and build it into something stronger. And basically, as soon as we're comfortable enough with the strength of the algorithm, we're going to be productizing it, and we've sort of solicited ongoing input from law enforcement, and we're going to work with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, which is a nationwide Internet crimes investigation task force in order to sort of deploy the tool on a broader scale and incorporate it into their training as well. So what you can do, which is I'm sure what you're all wondering, I think that our programs are really just beginning to show impact, and this is really exciting for us. But at the same time, we really need people who know a lot about technology, have expertise in either data analysis or coding or something that would really help make our programs stronger. We need insight from people like that. And so we get some of that through our tech task force, but we're always looking for new people who have a passion for technology to help us with our work, to give us ideas, to talk with us. So we welcome ideas from those people, and then also just from anyone who has an interest in this subject in general. So that's it. You can email me if you have any questions.